Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us this afternoon. My name is Susan Ward, and I'm with the Bureau of Student Wellness at the New Hampshire Department of Education. I'm here with Granite State Children's Alliance Know and Tell Education Coordinator and Training Specialist, Stephanie Arroyo, and Outreach Project Manager, Jana El Sayed. They will be here discussing 5 actions Granite Staters can take to protect children from abuse and neglect. Our presenters will be answering questions and all of your questions, any of your questions at the end of the session. So please write your questions in the chat and we'll be sure to cover those at the end of the presentation. So thank you so much, Stephanie and Jana, for taking the time to talk to us about this really important topic today. And I know children are most likely in their homes pretty much 24/7, and some of them might not be in the safest of situations. So thanks for opening up the discussion and about what we can do to protect our children from abuse and neglect.
Great, thank you so much, Sue. So I'm going to try to continue to share my screen. So today's topics, we're going to talk about, kind of reaffirm for those people who are a little bit know and tell educated that you are a mandated reporter. We're going to talk about what that role means here in New Hampshire. And for our folks who are more community-based and maybe parents online or whatnot, really define what that looks like for you as well. We're going to talk about the signs of abuse and neglect, what that looks like, how we can look for those signs when we're in this remote learning environment. We've developed some various learning materials to help both educators and the general community on how to continue those conversations with their students, with children that they may be communicating with online. We also have 15 apps that parents should know about, and Jana's also developed a brand new media form, family agreement, yes, family agreement that we'll share in the packet. We'll talk about the 3 ways that you can report abuse and neglect, what that looks like with DCYF. We have a video that we filmed at DCYF Central Intake, and we call it the Nosy Neighbor who makes a report to DCYF. It was actually filmed in Concord, New Hampshire with one of our DCYF supervisors. So we'll show that so that you get a better understanding of what it actually looks like to make that phone call and when. We'll talk about DCYF hours. They're open 24/7. And then we're going to give you some tools to how you continue to be the difference for these children, especially during the COVID-19 and beyond. So we'll talk about that. So today's programming, I just want to be really clear that this is not the Know and Tell full education program. This is more about being Know and Tell aware and continuing that conversation. So Know and Tell is a public responsibility initiative to educate all adults to know the signs of abuse and how to tell responsible authorities when they recognize them when a child is in need of help. This introduction video that I'm going to play is a video that we developed about a year ago with many stakeholders across the state, really bringing that call to action to Granite Staters, because in New Hampshire, we are a universal reporting state, which means every single adult, someone who's 18 and older, is a mandated reporter. So I'm going to play this quick video just to kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about, and then we'll move forward after that.
I am one of over 926,000 adults in the Granite State that is mandated by law to report suspected child abuse. You are too. We all are.
Only 1 in 10 child abuse cases ever get reported. That means that 90% of child victims of abuse still need our help.
We can all learn to know the signs of abuse.
Know that you can report anonymously.
Know that information you provide is better than no information.
Know that you do not need proof of abuse or neglect to report. You only need to suspect abuse or neglect.
Tell authorities when we suspect abuse and neglect.
Tell by calling DCYF at 1-800-894-5533.
Or tell by calling your local police department.
Or tell by calling 911 for immediate help.
We can all commit to know and tell.
I 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 know and tell.
Children depend on you to be their voice.
That last part from Joy is really the essence of know and tell. Children do depend on adults to be their voice. So we're going to talk about that as we move forward today. And we're going to talk about the 5 actions that you can take to protect children from abuse. It starts with knowing that you are a mandated reporter. In New Hampshire, as I mentioned earlier, we're all mandated reporters. It does not matter what your occupation is or whatnot. You are a mandated reporter if you're 18 and older. Our Child Protection Act, RSA 169C 29, mandates that any physician, surgeon, teacher, it lists a whole bunch of occupations, but then the key right here in the middle is that any other person who has reason to suspect that a child under the age of 18 has been abused or neglected must make a report to the Division for Children, Youth, and Family Services. So it really doesn't matter what your occupation is or what these occupations are that are listed in the front of this Protection Act. If you're 18 and older, you're a mandated reporter. So in New Hampshire, you only have to suspect abuse. You don't have to have proof. It's not your job to find the proof that abuse actually occurred. If you suspect abuse or neglect, you must be the one that makes the report directly to DCYF. You can't pass it off to someone else. It actually has to be you. Failure to report in New Hampshire is punishable by law. It's up to $1,000 and possibly a year in jail. So we don't see that very often, but that can happen in New Hampshire. So it's something to know and understand your responsibility as a mandated reporter and make those calls when you have that suspicion. It literally sometimes is a gut check. It's that something's off, the child has said something, I'm seeing things that don't sit right. Make that phone call to DCYF or law enforcement, the professionals at hand, and let them decide. Because what if you're right? That's always the question. What if you're right? You're the person that may get that child the help they so desperately need. So we're going to talk briefly about the 5 warning signs. We developed this document to kind of help bring light to this. The first things you're going to check about, let me back up. So prior to COVID-19, a lot of the calls that we would get from educators and youth serving organizations around the state were, is this a know and tell moment? I have this suspicion, this is what's going on, this is what the child has said. Do I make the phone call now? And we always said, yes, if you're even questioning whether or not you make the phone call, you should be making the phone call. Since COVID-19, we've actually gotten phone calls from educators, paraprofessionals, youth serving professionals who are now questioning, has my role, is it stayed the same? Have the rules changed? Has the law changed now that I'm seeing things in a different light? I'm seeing children in their home environments, not my classroom. Do I still have to make that report? And the answer is absolutely yes. So we developed this little checklist that has the 5 things that you can look for, whether you're in a Zoom meeting like this, whether you're just having a conversation with them or whatnot, that just helps remind you of the top signs to look for. So the first thing you're going to kind of do is look for their physical appearance. Do they have any bruises, marks, injuries? Is their hygiene significantly different than what you're used to seeing? Their attire, look for those changes. And then you're going to kind of span out beyond the child, especially if you're in a Zoom like this, to their environment. Check for signs of violence, drugs and alcohol, or family dysfunction. What's going on behind the scenes when you're in a Zoom call like this? What are they talking about? What are they telling you? And then look at their behavior and affect. Have they had a significant change in mood or presentation? Are they in distress when they're talking to you? Are they actually making outcries of abuse? They're telling you things aren't okay at home, things like that. Then look for engagement. We're all very invested in this remote learning that we're all partaking in, and we are now know that we're partaking in it for the rest of the year in New Hampshire. Are they engaged in their education? Are they participating? Are they interacting? Are they communicating with you? Has that changed from what you know normally of that child? And then lastly, supervision. Check to see if they have access to a responsible adult and the level of involvement of that adult in their home environment. So those are just quickly 5 things that you can look for in this type of setting to help you assess whether or not a child may be in distress, may need some help. or in the family as well. Anything you want to add to that? Yeah, that's it. Okay. This is the 10-4 faces rule. We have several materials on our website. This is a great postcard that we have. The 10-4 faces refer to infants and babies. 80% of sentinel injuries are in infants are unexplained bruising. But you need to pay attention. So in this view that you have of Janet and I right now, you can see us from the torso up. So you can see the torso, you can see our ears, kind of our neck, things like that. If you're seeing bruises or injuries in those areas, that warrants a question. How did you get that bruise? Things like that. If those reasonings for those injuries don't make sense, that's a call to DCYF, because those areas, the torso, neck, and ears, are not common places where children typically get injuries. When it comes to infants, if you go to the second part of this 10-4 faces, it's any child 4 years or younger that has any bruising anywhere on the child 4 months of younger, on the frenulum, the auricular, the cheek, eyes, or sclera, that is all highly suspect of abuse, because infants and babies, they're not crawling, they're not mobile, they shouldn't have those injuries. So the frenulum is that little piece of in your mouth that connects to your tongue and your lips and things. If that's injured, there's only a few ways that gets injured. Usually it's shoving something forcefully into the baby's mouth. The auricular, the ear part, there's usually no bruising on the ear. Cheeks, eyes, and sclera, again, if babies aren't cruising, they shouldn't be bruising. So if you're seeing any type of bruising around the eyes, if you're seeing sometimes petechiae, the dots around the eyes, and the sclera, the white part of the eye, has any yellowing, that can also indicate strangulation. So those are extremely highly suspect. So as everyone's online right now, as you're strolling social media, things like that, and you're seeing pictures of infants and people socially, and you see infants with bruises, that is a call to DCYF. Those kids cannot protect themselves. They can't ask for help. They can't make an outcry of abuse. So those are highly suspect. So I just wanted to highlight the 10-4 faces rule. And again, for our older kiddos, the torso, ears, and neck, yes, they can get injuries there. Kids roughhouse, kids fall off bikes and things like that, but there's going to be a very, very reasonable explanation for how that injury happened. For example, I have an 8-year-old. Last year, I came home from a work trip and I was pulling her hair back to do her hair before school. And I hadn't seen her for 2 days. And when I pulled her hair back, her entire ear was a shade of purple I had never seen before. And so I immediately asked her, Lucy, how did you hurt yourself? And she started to cry. She was upset. She didn't initially want to tell me what happened, but she finally did. And when she told me what happened, she said, Mommy, I was playing at John's house. We were twisting on the swings and my head got caught in the metal chains of the swing. That injury made complete sense. She was crying and upset because she hadn't followed directions to stop twisting in the swing, so she was afraid of being in trouble. Her whole story made sense. So your kids are going to tell you how they got injured, and it's going to make sense. When it doesn't make sense and it raises that red flag to you, that you have that pit in your stomach, maybe the hair on the back of your neck starts to stand up, something's not right here, that's enough to call DCYF in New Hampshire. You only have to suspect abuse. Yeah.
So we all know that children love being on social media. They love their video games and their apps on their phones, and they were already using them before COVID-19 happened. But now it's an increased rate. They're always on their devices, whether it be using them for school or after playing on different games. It's a perpetrator's dream to use these different apps to talk to children because they're allowed and they're able to pretend to be children at that point. So you find that a lot of perpetrators are pretending to be your child's age or your student's age and having communication with them. They usually communicate through chats on these types of apps because they'll later be deleted or they can be erased. That means that there's no proof that it ever happened. Another thing that perpetrators like to do is they pretend to be the child's age, and then once they get what they want, whether that might be photos or messages, then they start threatening the child saying, well, I'm going to tell your parents or I'm going to tell your teacher that you did this. So it's very important that we're having these conversations about using devices safely, which is why we have another session coming up later on this week with Nicole, and she's going to talk about child safety. But one thing that we did feel that was necessary was to create a device agreement. So this is our family device and media agreement, and it just goes over the basic topics that all parents should be able to have with their children. So talking about not creating or downloading accounts without parent permission or never sharing your GPS location. You'd be surprised that most apps that are downloaded on iPads or computers or even phones ask for GPS notifications, and kids don't know to say no to that. So it's having simple conversations about what's appropriate to be sharing and making sure they know that they have to be honest with you if they want to be able to use these devices. And this is accessible to you, so these can be printed out for your families.
Yeah. The other thing about the device agreement and what Nicole and Matt Fleming is from the ICAC division. He's the Internet Crimes Against Children division in New Hampshire. He'll speak on Thursday more about these devices and apps and things like that and the dangers of sexual predators online. But there's so much that children reveal about themselves in these chat rooms. They don't understand that they're giving their perpetrators all kinds of information. They can see things in the background and instantly know the types of things that they like, from the stuffed animals on their bed to what's hanging on their bulletin boards, things like that. So there's a lot of safety issues that really need to be addressed with kids that they really need to know about. And so it's very important to have some sort of device and media agreement. And for our educator folks who are working in the remote learning, Google Classroom and things like that, pay attention to those things in the background. That's where you're going to get a lot of information about how things are going on in that home and for that child.
Another thing a lot of Facebook users don't know and has been being pushed out is a lot of people are bored right now. So they're doing those fun, what was your first pet? Where did you grow up? And they're answering all this information. So if a perpetrator looked on a parent's Facebook page, they could have all that information to pretend that they knew the parents and start talking to the children. There's so many different ways that perpetrators will manipulate a situation to access kids. And it's really a craft for them. So that's why it's so important to be very careful what we're posting on social media and what apps we're allowing our children to have reach of.
Yeah, and the sexual predators are home. They have nothing else to do right now. So this is their dream. They have access to kids, unlimited access, because the kids are on daily all day long now. And a lot of them are not working. So we have to be really, really careful about that. And like I said, pay attention to what's happening in the background for you teachers and things like that that are working in classrooms and whatnot, to learn a little bit more about what's happening.
So we also created these documents, and it's really about checking in on your students, or if you're a school-facing organization or a nonprofit organization that usually has access to kiddos. When you're having these conversations over video like this for Zoom, just checking in as you normally would can give you a lot of information about how that child is doing and how their well-being is. So a routine check-in can just be, how are you feeling today? How was your night? And you're not only listening to their response, but you need to be noticing what they're doing with their face, how their body changes. Maybe they're hunched over now because something did happen last night and they're afraid to tell you. These different things are what you should be looking for now that you're in a Zoom contact instead of that face-to-face. What's not been working well? What fun things have you had planned today? Those are just very easy conversations to have with children, and they won't suspect that you're trying to pull any information out. They're just going to think, oh, my teacher cares about what I'm doing, and they'll want to have those conversations, and that's where you're going to get a lot of information.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for our educator folks who may be listening, do what you would normally do in the classroom. Don't let the technology and all of this change how you talk to kids, because the information that you get on a daily basis is the same information you're going to get online. One of the most important things, you can also ask them, what else would you like to share with me today? If they don't want to talk to you online because out loud, if they're in a Zoom like this, maybe they can chat with you, send their message through chat, things like that. Give them other ways that they can communicate with you. I know that my daughter's teachers are encouraging them to have these communications. They're sending videos and things like that, so they can kind of keep those lines of communication open. And that's the biggest thing that you can do. It takes 10 seconds, 15 seconds to start a kiddo's day with a, how are you? I'm so excited that you're here today. I can't wait to see what we're going to accomplish today, kind of thing. Great job on X, that kind of thing.
So when we talk about reassurance and validation, you have to make that child realize they're not the only ones going through this. A lot of kiddos don't understand that other people are are either upset or having a hard time dealing with this. So you acknowledging that this is a new way of learning and that you're learning about it and you guys are going to learn how to succeed together makes all the difference for a child. Having that sense of a positive note or telling that child that you care about them or asking them how they're doing, that's going to mean the world to them because they're so used to having you every day. To be honest, teachers see children more than their own parents do because they were in school for so many hours. They've built relationships with you. They feel comfortable to tell you things. And that's why you guys do become our #1 reporters of child abuse and neglect.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing you can do is humanize yourself. A lot of, especially younger kiddos, they kind of get freaked out when they see you outside of school, when you're in the grocery store and you run like, you go shopping too. You know, they don't understand that you have a life outside of them. So sometimes sharing, not oversharing, you know, being appropriate, but sharing that this is different for you and this is hard, but we're doing the best we can and we're in this together and we're going to get through it together. That can be really, really reassuring for kiddos during this time.
Of course, we're all concerned and worried about children's wellness, how we don't have those eyes that we used to have on them. So we're really focusing on these Zoom calls or video chat. So it's important to have those conversations. So what did you have for breakfast? What did you have for lunch? You seem hyper today. What did you have? Did you have extra sugar? Having those typical conversations will give you that information, and hopefully that will gauge whether or not you're concerned about that child. Having them talk about what's good in their life, what they're enjoying, what they're struggling with, be open. If they are having issues with class, or maybe they're having a hard time learning without that person-to-person contact where you're able to give them that extra help, talk to them about that and try to have solutions for them. Just be open and honest with them and have those open dialogue conversations that makes the world for the children.
Yeah. These questions that we're showing really aren't rocket science. These are the questions that you guys are so good at asking. So it's just a matter of keeping those conversations opening and asking them and finding different ways to ask them if you have a child who maybe isn't responding online. And, you know, things have changed. They're changing every single day. So last week we found out that we're not going back into schools. So, you know, how they were doing last week may be very different than how they're feeling this week. So it's so important to keep these conversations going and checking in with them and kind of motivating them to continue talking and opening up to you.
So observations and responses, it's okay to have that communication with them. So I know you love to dance. Have you been able to keep dancing? That makes a child want to open up and start talking. And that's what you usually do on your day-to-day. You would normally ask them, oh, how was your weekend? So now you're just doing it on Zoom because you don't see them in your classroom. I noticed that you shared you were struggling with this. How can I help you? Once again, you're just reaffirming that you care and that you're there for them if they need you, and that if they want to open up anymore, they can.
And I think, again, the biggest things are paying attention to what's going on in the background when you're on these Zoom calls and things like that. You don't know if there's a parent hovering nearby, so you do have to be a little bit careful about what you're asking. But I think if you keep it in the realm of the types of questions that we've put on here and the types of questions you're used to asking kiddos, you're going to be just fine. Okay. When you call DCYF, how do you know when to make that phone call? One of the things that in our collaborations with DCYF, we've talked about when you've made multiple documented attempts to reach a child and family or their caregiver, and they've all gone unanswered, ignored. You've made phone calls, you've emailed, you've reached out to the emergency contacts, they've been exhausted and nobody can make contact with that family. That's a reason to become concerned. So you should still be following, if you're an educator, what your school policies are for that chain of command. As far as, you know, you as a teacher reaching out, maybe you haven't gotten anywhere, so you pass it off to the school counselor, who then maybe involves the principal, who may then involve the superintendent. So make sure that you're still following those protocols. But once you document all the different attempts that you've made, and then if you've exhausted those and you're really concerned about the family, that's when you're going to call for a well-being check. And the more information you can provide them on the dates and times and the different ways that you try to make contact, that will be really helpful for them in determining what steps are necessary. If the child is missing from programming or appointments, after multiple documented attempts to engage, that may be a reason to also call DCYF. Again, if you've noticed that unexplained bruising, welts, cuts, or other injuries on the child, the adult or caregiver, you would make a call to DCYF. We know that during this time with families home and the stress levels are up, that there is more substance abuse happening, there's more domestic violence happening and all of that. So if you're seeing any of that on a child, adult, or caregiver, that may be a reason to call DCYF. Another reason to call DCYF is when the child presents drastically different from how they have been in the past. So it maybe they're showing significant weight loss, a change in hygiene. They're behaving very differently than how they've behaved in the past. Maybe they're really aggressive, or they've become depressed and despondent and they're not interacting in any way. Those are reasons to call DCYF as well. But they should be significantly different from what you're used to seeing with that. If you believe the child, adult, or caregiver is under the influence of drugs and alcohol. So with kids being home, they have access to more things. So if you believe that a child is under the influence, or a parent or caregiver is under the influence, that may be a reason to also call for safety concerns. And then again, if you saw or it was reported to you that there were illicit drugs or paraphernalia or other hazards that create safety concerns in the home, for example, weapons being out in the open within reach, where that's a safety issue, that may be a reason to call DCYF as well. And then as always, if there's an outcry of abuse and neglect or domestic violence, then you would want to call DCYF. Okay, this is the number to DCYF, 1-800-894-5533. They are open 24/7. Again, as many organizations have had to adjust their hours and adjust their processes, DCYF has adjusted some of those things, but they are still open 24/7 to take your calls. If you suspect abuse and you're not sure about making the call, you're questioning whether or not you need to make that call, you should always err on the side of caution and make that phone call. Let them help you make the decision and determine what happens next, okay? Because they're the professionals in that area. So I just want to share with you the 3 ways to report. You can report full disclosure. Full disclosure means that when you make your phone call to DCYF, you'll give all of your identifying information and the reason for your call, and it won't be held back from the parents or caregiver should they ask. Confidentially means that you're going to give all your identifying information, but it will be redacted in any paperwork and it will not be given to the family if they ask unless it goes to court. And then anonymously means that you are calling from a blocked number and you're not giving any of your identifying information or organizational information as well. And you're just giving the concern and the information you have on that child. We highly recommend, if you are an educator working within a school capacity or a youth serving capacity where you're in a child-facing position, that you are making your phone calls to DCYF confidentially or full disclosure. The reason being is that you want to protect yourself, because in New Hampshire, we are a mandated reporting state, universal reporting state. You want there to be a record that you met your mandate and made that phone call. It protects you and it also protects the organization that you work for.
And it allows you to further advocate for the child and help the child. If you don't give any information, there's no way DCYF can contact you for more information. Sometimes you know more than you realize, and then when somebody starts talking to you and asking the right questions, more information comes out.
Yeah, and especially during this time of COVID-19, we really need you to continue to be that advocate for these children, to be able to check in with them periodically, and for DCYF to be, or law enforcement to be able to call you back. So it's really important that you make your phone calls confidentially or full disclosure as much as possible. This is a video that I'm going to play. Again, this video was filmed at DCYF Central Intake. The nosy neighbor who is making the phone call is one of our staff members at one of our child advocacy centers. So she's an actor playing a nosy neighbor. Angie Prindle is the DCYF Central Intake supervisor. So she is real. What you're going to see as far as the background at DCYF, that is DCYF Central Intake in Concord. The names, location, and scenario, all the information in that has been changed, but these are typical scenarios that do happen across the state. So we'll play that video, and just to give you a little insight that making this phone call really isn't a scary thing. They are there to help you through the process and do the best that we can to get children and families help. So we'll play that and then we'll finish up.
DCYF Intake, this is Angie.
Hi, Angie. I have some concerns about my neighbor's child. I don't want to provide my name, though. I'm afraid of retaliation.
Okay, I can help. You can report anonymously. However, your phone number shows up on our caller ID, and we do need to include this in the report. However, we can keep it confidential from the family. Please note your information may be disclosed to court or to the police if they become involved.
Can we keep this confidential from the family?
Okay. What's the last name of the oldest child in the household?
It's Smith.
And what's the family's address?
So they live on Main Street on the floor above me, but I don't know the apartment number.
Okay. And is that Main Street in Hallsville?
Yes.
Okay. And what's their phone number?
So I'm sorry, but I don't know the mother's phone number. I don't have a lot of information about the family.
It's okay. If you don't know the answers to all of my questions, answer them the best you can. What's the name of the child that you're concerned about?
So his name is John Smith.
And what's John's date of birth?
Not 100% sure of that either, but he is like 8 or 9.
Any other children in the home?
Yeah, he has a little sister. She's about 3 years old.
And do you know her name?
It might be Jan or Jane.
And who are John's parents?
So he lives with his mother, Beth. His father's name is also John, but he's not in the picture at all.
Okay. And who are Jan's parents?
So Beth is her mother too. The dad is David, but he's in and out of the home.
Thank you for this information. Tell me the reason why you called today.
So I'm calling for neglect. The mother seems to be doing drugs and the home is filthy. The children never seem to be supervised. The mother doesn't make meals for them. I hear lots of screaming through the walls.
Tell me more about the mother abusing drugs. What drug is she using?
So I'm pretty sure she's using pills, whatever she can get her hands on.
How do you know this information?
Well, just yesterday I saw her popping pills at the park when her daughter was playing. Like I said, this was just yesterday. I saw her doing it like a month ago too.
Are the pills prescribed to her by a doctor?
So I think initially they were prescribed to her, but I believe now she's getting them off the street. I frequently see her downstairs in front of the apartment building. She looks like she's exchanging money with people who look like drug dealers.
How does Beth act when she's using drugs?
Well, she's just like completely out of it. She's nodding off. She can't care for her kids.
Is she actively using right now?
I mean, so I don't know. I haven't seen her yet today. I usually see her like once a day, and she always seems high. So I mean, I'd say she uses every day.
When she uses, where are the kids?
Sometimes John's at school when she uses, but the little girl she's there with her every day.
When was the last time you saw the kids face to face?
I saw them last night. Just last night, playing outside in the parking lot. Mom was absolutely nowhere to be found. The little boy was running in and out of cars, and the little girl was playing near the woods.
Did anyone contact the police when this happened?
So I did contact the police, but the kids had gone back inside by the time the police showed up. So I have no idea what the police were able to do.
You also said the home was filthy. When was the last time you were in the home?
It was probably like a month or two ago. She really doesn't let a lot of people in the home.
What did you see when you were in there?
Clutter, lots of clutter. The dishes were piled up to the ceiling, clothes, toys everywhere. The kids were sleeping like on a mattress on the floor without any sheets on it.
Okay. You mentioned that the mother doesn't make meals for them. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the kids are just super skinny. I mean, she feeds them nothing but macaroni and cheese. I know she's on food stamps and still goes to a food pantry, but I don't know. I feel like she's probably selling her food stamps for drug money.
How do you know that's all they eat?
Well, I've heard John talking about having macaroni and cheese again, and I don't ever see her coming home with groceries.
Do you know if they go to the doctors or if they're medically underweight or malnourished?
I don't know that. I mean, Mom keeps to herself. John seems delayed, though. His speech is really difficult to understand.
Okay. You also mentioned that you hear screaming. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's a nightly occurrence. When you hear the mother yelling to the kids to get on the bed, and she's doing that in a way where she's like screaming at the top of her lungs.
How are the kids reacting?
Well, they're crying hysterically. The little one especially, she'll cry for like a half an hour at a time.
Do you see any marks or injuries on the kids?
I mean, they have like bruises on their knees, but I mean, I can hear them roughhousing a lot, so.
Are there supports that help out mom, like family or community agencies?
So I think the grandmother takes them once in a while. There's a lady that comes to the home once a week anyway. She carries a clipboard, but I don't know what she does when she's there.
What things does mom do well?
I mean, you know, she does get her son to school every day. She looks like hell, but she's at the bus stop with him every morning.
Are there concerns for domestic violence or mom's mental health or physical health?
I think that one of the dads is in jail because he beat up mom. I saw the police take him away like probably 6 months ago or so. Mom was crying hysterically. She had a black eye. They used to fight constantly, and literally I would never get any rest while he was living there.
Thank you for this information. Is there anything else you think I should know?
I just honestly want someone to go out there and make sure the kids are okay. I mean, I just feel like no child should ever have to live like this.
We will be screening this in for investigation for concerns for mother's drug abuse and exposure to domestic violence. A child protective service worker will be going to the home today, as mom may currently be under the influence and unable to care for her 3-year-old. Thank you for your call.
Thank you so much.
So a couple things just to highlight again about that video. You always have the option of making your phone call full disclosure, confidentially or anonymously. If you're a child-facing professional, you really should be making that call confidentially or full disclosure. At the end of the call, you saw that Angie let her know that the call would be screened in. So screened in means it's going to go on for further investigation. If there hadn't been enough information, it may have been screened out, which means it's not going to go on for further investigation, but that information does stay in the system. So if somebody else calls, that information is there to be reviewed again. So you have to, it's always better, like we always say, to call and err on the side of caution, because you don't know if you're the first caller, you don't know if you're the 5th caller or the 17th caller, but you might be the missing piece of that child's puzzle, that child's story that gets it screened in. So most of the time, 99% of the time, you're going to know whether or not it's getting screened in or screened out. If they're not able to make a decision because there's a lot of information that they need to review, or they're just not sure, they may need to consult a supervisor. They will let you know that they're going to consult somebody else, and they will let you know via letter or phone call back that it's being screened in or screened out if they have your contact information. Okay. Anything else you want to add there? No. And then, you know, these videos that we made were made well before COVID-19. Just pay attention to your communities. Pay attention to the kids in your neighborhood. There's a saying about, you know, communities aren't well if the children aren't well. If you haven't seen the children in your neighborhood lately, what's going on? Obviously, there's a stay-at-home order, but kids can be outside playing. If you know that kids are being left home alone and they're not being properly supervised, maybe there's a 8-year-old taking care of their 4-year-old sister, not appropriate. That would be a phone call to DCYF so we can maybe get that family some support. DCYF is not in the business of removing kids from their home unless it's absolutely necessary. It's about getting them resources. And right now, there are a lot of resources in our state to help families. So we want to make sure that we're doing that as much as possible. Okay. So again, DCYF central intake is open 24/7. You should be able to call the number and get somebody to make your report. For immediate safety concerns, if there's something that's happening in the moment, you're going to call 911 to contact your local law enforcement. There are many ways that you can be the difference for a child. As caring adults, we all have a responsibility to protect children. We can only help the children that we can reach. And the way that starts is with you being the difference and making that phone call. Children do depend on you to be their voice. So there are multiple ways. I'm going to let Jana talk a little bit about some other ways that you can continue to become know and tell aware. And then we'll talk about know and tell educated, which is a different level of awareness.
So April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and we also had No One Tell Day yesterday, and the governor signed a proclamation for No One Tell Day. So we've been doing a lot of different ways for you to get involved and show your support for child abuse intervention. So one of the ways that you can do that is by liking our No One Tell Facebook page. We have a lot of great resources. That's where you're going to find a lot of these documents and graphics that we create with helpful information. So liking our Facebook page, sharing it with your friends so that they can like it as well would be huge. Another thing that we are doing this month is we have a Facebook frame, and there's 3 different options. So all you would have to do is go to your Facebook page, and then you would click on it, add frame, and then you just search No One Tell, and you'll find the 3 different options. Using hashtags is another great way to show your support. So our hashtag that we use is hashtag I know and tell, but then also using hashtag New Hampshire, hashtag New Hampshire politics. That's a way to garner more attention to this very important topic.
And challenge your friends to be No One Tell informed and No One Tell educated. We get a lot of mileage out of that. It's really about protecting kids. And you know, the one thing about No One Tell, it's an adult education program. However, with its growth over the last couple of years, kids are starting to recognize the No One Tell logo, and they're asking questions about No One Tell and what does that mean? And because of No One Tell and recognizing the logos, they're actually making reports. They're actually disclosing about abuse that they've suffered. So they're finding their voice, which is fantastic. So this is another way for you to indicate that you're a safe person to get children the help that they need. We have 2 more sessions this week. Tomorrow we have Andrew's Clinical Corner. He's our mental health clinician at one of our child advocacy centers. He's going to talk a little bit about how the impact of COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place orders have had an effect on children and how families are functioning. They're going to talk about the pandemic, how it relates to traumatic stress, current concerns regarding youth safety, and the role educators play in supporting and protecting our most at-risk children inside and outside of the virtual classroom. So that'll be tomorrow's session at 3 o'clock with Andrew. And then on Thursday, we have internet safety during isolation and remote learning with Nicole Ledoux. She's our quality director of victim services and quality assurance. And then Matthew Fleming, who is our ICAC task force investigator. And they're going to talk about the importance of speaking with children, engaging in safe online behavior, and talking about the increased reports to ICAC. Like I said earlier, reports are up as far as, well, let me back up. Reports are down as far as making reports to DCYF. Since COVID-19 has happened, our reports are down more than 50, about nearly to 50% from what they used to be. From educators, they're down more than 58%. Because educators aren't having eyes on children. So another reason why we need our communities to step up when they see things in their neighborhoods and in their communities to report. But also with Nicole and Matt's presentation on Thursday, the reports for them have gone up. So for the reports for online safety and online perpetration, those numbers have gone up significantly since COVID-19 started because, like I said earlier, perpetrators are at home. They have nothing better to do than to groom children and search for children online. So they're going to talk about the reality of that and kind of bring it home because this is what is actually happening in New Hampshire. So I highly recommend tuning into both of those sessions later this week or checking out the recordings on Facebook Live later on. The other ways that you can become No One Tell educated. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is not our entire course by any means. This is really just about becoming No One Tell aware. You can go to knowandtell.org and register to take our course. It's broken into 3 modules, educate, inform, and protect, which really break down the different signs of abuse, looking at neglect, physical abuse, and sexual abuse, and how to identify a child when they need your help. It talks more in depth about that role as a mandated reporter. It gives you tips for reporting. One thing I didn't mention, which I'll mention now, if you have a suspicion of abuse, you should be making that report as quickly as possible, within about a half an hour of that suspicion, because it comes down to getting a child help as quickly as possible, and people have to come together to make that happen. So the sooner you do that, the sooner those things can happen. Then our inform module is more about how and when to make that report and what does it look like. So in that module, we have 3 different DCYF videos that you can watch, and we talk about some other tips for making that report and things to look for. And then our protect module really brings home your role in the child protection system. So it really does start with you. And usually by the time you guys get to the third module, you're seeing where you fit into that child protection system. And so we'll talk about DCYF, what happens beyond the phone call, why some calls stay with DCYF for the investigation process, and why others may go on to one of our child advocacy centers where they have a forensic interview, and what that whole process looks like. It basically boils down that we all have a responsibility to protect children, and we should all be know and tell educated. So this is a way that you can go online and continue to be educated. The online course does take about two hours or so, depending on how many videos that you select and things like that. You can also see your own child advocacy center by county at the end of module 3. You can print your certificate for having taken the course if you need professional development hours. There is a certificate button at the end of module 3, so you can get those hours as well. So I'm just going to recap. So if you don't take anything else away from this today, please take away this. So with that, I think we can open it up for questions. If you have questions, Sue, do you want me to go back to stop sharing mode?
Sure, you can go ahead and pull up my video and yours as well. Thank you. I just want to say that was an incredible presentation with so many great pieces of information. I think it's really staggering when you think about the number of reports from teachers that have gone down, which makes sense because children aren't going into the classroom, into that brick and mortar structure. At the same time, teachers are in people's dining rooms or living rooms, and seeing those children sometimes in a Zoom call, but really they're not connecting the way they were. So I think you had a lot of great information about questions to ask and ways to get involved for just making sure our students are safe. So thank you for that. And I absolutely love that you mentioned the empowerment that some kids have that know the actual phrase know and tell, and they know how to advocate for themselves. And that is so incredible and so refreshing to hear. So I really think this information is great. I also did take that course that was discussed toward the end, and I found it extremely refreshing, and I feel really confident and comfortable. Not that I didn't before, but I know where my call is going and how it's being processed and what's happening next. So I really also encourage people to take that course. So
yeah, it's really sad right now. It's a hard time. This COVID-19, it's not going to get much easier. We know we've got a few months to go, and then we're going to be in summer, and kids are definitely out of school then. What does it look like then? That's a whole nother conversation. But one of the things that we do know that's happening, calls are down. They're down more than 50%. That's a really scary thing because we know calls go down in June, between June and August when kids are out of school. It is worse than that. The phones are eerily quiet. We have DCYF workers who are on call who aren't being called because there's nowhere to go when the calls aren't coming in. We have kids in New Hampshire, young kids who are calling 911 because they've been sexually abused. They can't take it anymore. We've had kids run to a neighbor's house to get help because they've been physically abused. That is happening. And as this continues to go on, we're going to start seeing more of that. And so we really need to pay attention to our communities. If we hear, we're in the apartment building and we hear our neighbors down the hall screaming at their kids, and there's a lot of commotion, things like that, and then we see the child the next day with an injury, we need to, assess whether or not something's more is going on there. We need to pay attention. Like I said earlier, communities can't be well if the children aren't well. We have to pay attention to how our children are doing and how adults are doing. This isn't easy for anyone, even families who are the most put together and things like that. This is stressful. This is new. This isn't something that we've all been there, done that before, you know, so we have to kind of band together, protect kids, and, you know, offer those resources. There's a lot of resources. If you go to our Facebook page and our website, there's a lot of resources beyond Know and Tell with our partners, DCYF and other agencies they have so much to offer families. It's not a bad thing to make a report. It's about getting the child and family the help that they need.
Exactly. That's the main point. It's all about the child.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
hopefully that's what people will be able to take away. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Just the harsh reality that things are happening and children do need our help. So it's more important now than ever to use your role as a mandated reporter, whether you're a teacher or you're in a child-facing organization or you're just a neighbor. You need to be picking up the phone if you're concerned.
That's right. We're all mandated reporters.
If you're at the grocery store and you see a child who's presenting differently, you see a parent who's losing it on the child and they're hitting the child in the grocery store, you're a mandated reporter. You need to report. That would be a 911 call because that's in the moment. Make those phone calls. It's really, really important.
Well, I can't thank you, Stephanie and Jenna, enough today for providing this amazing information. I'm hoping that people can walk away with some knowledge about what to do if they're in this situation and seeing our children suffering. So thank you for joining us today and taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And everyone, I encourage you to reach out to the Granite State Children's Alliance or the New Hampshire Department of Education if you have any other questions about this topic. Even if you're watching this a few hours from now when we're no longer live, reach out. We're always available and always willing and ready to get you the information that you need. So
absolutely.
So
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And join us back here tomorrow at 3 p.m. We have Granite State Children's Alliance mental health clinician, Andrew Wolf, here to discuss some important information from his clinical standpoint. So thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. Be safe.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.